problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country on, of course, what is Thirsty Thursday. What a great way to round out another week in lockdown. I'm really starting to actually have a lot of fun with this show, especially with so many more viewers every night and the comments rolling in that you are here watching and of course enjoying the show. So I really want to have that in the comments below. If you are, we're really loving the feedback. And if you're not, that's okay too. It's okay. We have so much competition when we are live some nights. I appreciate, like last night, we're up against NZ Hunter Adventures duck shooting episode. Don't mention duck shooting, Sarah. Don't mention duck shooting. Not after today. I'll have to paddle back upstream quite quickly. Now, I do feel for our duck hunters not being able to go out for opening weekend next weekend. It's nothing more frustrating than that cheeky sound. I heard it last night. The duck calls quacking away with that arrogance. They'll be grinding on every keen duck hunter's ears, I'm sure. But as you wait and continue to feed those ponds, to the hunters not allowed to go out on conservation land, only on private land, I'm sure the 1080 isn't being dropped at the moment. It's another frustration mounting as we stay at home for another couple of weekends as well, playing board games. Now, on board games tonight, I want to know, what is your favourite go-to board game? I want to see in the comments below, what was your favourite game you used to play as a family, back when your childhood, right through to, what you're playing now with your children or your friends, your mates. What card games do you play that you're really good at? I want to know in the comments below, because there's a few really unique, novel card games, not specific board games, that I think I want to stock up. Apparently, that's one of the biggest booming industries out there at the moment. I absolutely suck at Scrabble. Unfortunately, those school fees didn't really get in my grammar or my spelling up. I love Monopoly. And of course, who can go past if you haven't played Kiwis Against Morality? It's the game similar to Cards Against Humanity. Joel, you love board games. This is Joel, my producer, for those of you who have just joined Sarah's Country for the first time. What's your good go-to that you and your partner Sarah are playing at the moment?
Well, we love Settlers of Catan. That's probably our main go-to. Bit less mainstream, I guess, but it's pretty good.
You like Dungeons and Dragons. I'd heard of it, but I have no idea what it is. But it sounds very complicated and it's very bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much a board game. It's a whole other beast, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, but
shall I need to know about it?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
All right, I'll stick to things like poker and those sorts of things. Now, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, you can register to play online a quiz raising money for Rosie Dowling and her family after tragically losing the legendary Gavin Dowling. It's being organised by the New Zealand Young Farmers. So go over and register, especially tonight, because I think it closes in the morning. It's going to be 7 o'clock tomorrow night that you can join this online nationwide quiz and go to the NZ Young Farmers Facebook page. It's going to be a lot of fun connecting with each other across the country. Right, so coming up in the show, last Thursday we had Stuart Anderson, the new head of the M.Bovis eradication on Sarah's Country, and a few of you were a little peeved with me for not asking him the tough questions. I will say that I like to be tough, but I also like to be fair, and I don't feel it was appropriate last Thursday to throw the new bus driver under the bus for the past bus driver's choices, if you know what I mean. So instead, let's get somebody with some more depth that's been on the ground a long time. And of course, that is the Chief Science Advisor for MPI, John Roche, and he joins us after 7:20. So I'd like your questions on the M.Bovis eradication in the comments below. After 7:30, we get an update on processing capacities affecting farm gate prices and how upping the throughput under level 3, of course, is what we all want, but may not have a home for the backlogged product on the other side. We're going to go to senior sheep and beef analyst Mel Croad for an analysis of where we are this week and going into next.
Now, at the end of the show, we hear what has been happening in the decision-making Zoom rooms between the processors, Beef and Lamb, and Meat Industry Association. I understand there's a press release due out in my inbox throughout the show. I'll be keeping an eye on, and then we'll talk direct to the new head of MIA, Sirma Karapeeva, and of course, welcome the first woman to head one of our meat industry organisations. So we want to learn a lot more about her. But first up on Sarah's Country, we start at Mystery Creek, the large parcel of land that will lay empty this June, with no field days going ahead. We are, of course, joined on the show by Peter Nation, the CEO of Fieldays, to learn more about their online virtual field days instead. But of course, I want to know how they are dealing with exhibitors that are angry about the refunding process. It got me thinking about how rested all the rural service reps must be feeling. You know that if you're in that industry and you're going from AMP shows to expos to conferences and field days, that January through June madness of travel is incredible. I know my sister Ali, who works for Allflex, is enjoying a slower pace of life on the farm at the moment. So actually it came up, what a great way to celebrate a friend of mine's newly released music video with the aptly named title, Travelling Bones, to play to you while we get Peter on the phone.
This is Sarah's Country.
Of all my trips round the sun, my God, the last has been a good one. Finally found some peace of mind and learned how to leave the past behind. We've all got our own relief. Some like wine and some like green tea. All I know is no one knows what should and shouldn't be. And right now running makes me feel free. I would love to build a home, find a heart, make him my own. But I was born a rolling stone. I got restless traveling bones. I got restless traveling bones. The mountains fill me up. Without them I'm like an empty cup. And the wind makes me crazy, but the road keeps me sane. So I better get going again. I would love to build a home, find a heart and make him my own. But I was born a rolling stone. I got restless traveling bones. I got restless traveling bones. I gotta pack these bags, I got places to be. And good luck to any boy who tries to stop these wandering feet. The thing I miss the most is Mom and Dad's cups of tea. But I know I'll go back eventually. I would love to build a home, find a heart, make him my own. But I was born a rolling stone. I got restless traveling bones. I got restless traveling bones.
I don't know about you, but absolute voice of an angel. She melts my heart when I hear that woman open her mouth. That's Jenny Mitchell. You may have recognised her. She's achieved a lot for a young girl. If you love Jenny, please let me know in the comments below. I can see across all the different platforms we're streaming on. Loving your thank you, Debbie. Beautiful song. It absolutely is. Suze Bremner is saying that you're loving playing Uno. Uno is quite competitive and Roomy Cup with the kids, but played lots of Game of Knowledge and Police Alert. Wow. Hey, when you've got kids, there is so many new ways that you learn about things so much more. And Shirley, of course, says Monopoly. So if you've just joined us, we're talking about the best board games that you either enjoyed as in your childhood or you are enjoying now over lockdown. Looking forward to finding out what our next guest board game is. Now, carrying over from our awesome interview last night from Matt Hockin from the Rural Innovation Lab, that this is the time that we can really see innovation boom in lockdown. And of course, what organisation better to foster that and demonstrate it than the annual event renowned for celebrating it on our rural calendar? Of course, that is Fieldays at Mystery Creek. The virtual Fieldays will have a purpose-built hub where people can go online and search for products in July. But not everyone's so keen. So we've got CEO for Fieldays, Peter Nation, with me. Peter, firstly, I know that you're an extremely busy man and the thought of board games wouldn't even be on your radar at the moment, but there'd be something right from your childhood that you remember that you love playing.
Yeah, hi Sarah. There is actually. I used to play a bit of Monopoly, but I also used to play a lot of Battleships, which
Yes,
you don't see that game around much anymore, and probably it's electronic now. But that was a really fun game to play because it was a bit of strategy and a bit of thinking and a bit of body language, so it was really good.
Oh, certainly what you've been navigating in the last wee while is a bit of strategy, Peter. So, hey, Peter, I have to talk. We're going to do a bit of a positive sandwich with this interview. We want to celebrate the great things that you're doing, but we need to address some of the concerns with some of your exhibitors as well. So let's start by celebrating what you're releasing with a virtual online hub. Can you tell us all how it will work and when it will be online?
Yeah, I guess 4 weeks ago we were faced, like a lot of people, with having to postpone our main event, which would have started on the 10th of June, and that was 87 days out from the event. 5 weeks on, the team have done a really great job at, I think the new word's pivot strategy. Everyone's talking about pivoting, but we pivoted and we've put together, and in the throes of putting together a new virtual Fieldays platform. It's getting really good feedback from a lot of people. We understand it's not for everybody, but we saw that there was a gap in the market in June, Sarah, and that there was a need for something to be stood up, particularly for our exhibitors, but also the many customers that come to Fieldays annually anyway.
You do get a wide range of exhibitors there, from your very large sites with, of course, machinery on display, through to the smaller seminars and expos sites. So how do you really cater for all of those different types of needs of people wanting to interact with their products and services online?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And as I said before, the virtual site won't be for everybody, but the feedback we've had already from a lot to the very biggest has been really positive. It's never really going to replace the face-to-face and that human contact. But, a lot of us now, even during lockdown, are getting very used to shopping online and having virtual conversations or chat rooms with our power companies and all those sorts of people. So it's very much becoming part of our lives. So we're looking at replicating, obviously, the commerce site, but also the ability for exhibitors to show off new technology and innovation. A lot of them are very mature in their digital sites anyway, so it's about bringing all that together, allowing then the customer to be able to search by product or category, and then also obviously getting specials, deals, interacting with salespeople, blogging, competitions, all those things. The thing with virtual, though, it has another major bonus for the New Zealand market. A virtual site obviously has no boundaries within Mystery Creek, so then it becomes a worldwide platform. So we can reach a much bigger audience than what we would normally with 130,000 people coming to the event. But more importantly, we can take New Zealand technology and innovation to the world through that virtual platform.
Well, that's great. I think I'd like to see something like that continue, probably coinciding with the existing physical event potentially going into the future. So, of course, it's not like, as you said, for everyone. And those large manufacturing and tractor sites, I understand TAMA, which is the Tractor and Machinery Association, surveyed its members. 90% of them didn't have any interest in participating in that. And you can probably understand physically, not so easy. But down to the small exhibitors, Peter, it's all well and good to say there's a waiting list and know that Fieldays is extremely popular. But for people to have to, fork out like $4,000 for their site and not potentially get that back at this time when their business is suffering. How have you been able to navigate and make those tough decisions to only refund 3/4 of their site if they didn't want to participate in this online version?
I guess number one is we never said we wouldn't refund. As I said at the beginning of the interview, we're 4 weeks into what was probably a major crisis for everybody, and we've got a business to run ourselves. So we've spent quite a bit of time looking at that and restructuring it people-wise and everything else, and then obviously looking at alternatives as far as the virtual field days goes, and then dealing with the customers, 1,100 of them, and navigating our way through that, because we've given them some choices. If they don't want to participate, yes, they'll get a refund. They'll get a refund of 80% of their fee. We've sunk a lot of costs into the event leading up to it. As I said, we were 87 days out, and our terms and conditions are reasonably clear. And then we've given them a choice to go virtual, or we've given them a choice to leave a credit with us, and a number are choosing to do that as well, because when we run our next event, obviously they'll have money with us ready to go. So there's clear choices. We're working through those 1,100 exhibitors. There's a lot of them. But we're dealing with them individually and allowing them to come to our salespeople as well and work through their choices.
Absolutely, 100% understand that, of course, Fieldays is a major business and, of course, contributes substantially to our economy. Let's finish on a positive note. What are some of those really important things that are quintessential to Fieldays that we're really going to miss out on? I mean, your health hub, for instance, checks on the health of so many people once a year, as well as, of course, the networking face-to-face with international interest, and not to mention, of course, the Innovation Awards.
Yeah, I guess I haven't said we're not going to do that virtually either. So our priority to start with, Sarah, was to get the commercial platform in place, because we know that's important to exhibitors. It's really important to keep that supply chain open and allow those exhibitors, a number of who have indented stock ready for that June event, and a number who don't have digital platforms that'll enjoy this opportunity. And then we'll start looking at how we might build some of the other pieces. Now, you mentioned the Health and Wellbeing Hub. Last year we had over 20,000 people come to that. With it not being in June, that's 20,000 people that haven't touched a medical person as far as advice and support goes. I think we all know in the rural arena at the moment they're probably more isolated than they've ever been. There's no reps driving up and down drives and things. So I personally think that there's an opportunity there. The innovations, we're working through that and how that might look like. And the international trade piece, as I said earlier, the ability to actually open those borders up virtually. Most people would say or would agree that the borders aren't going to be open in a hurry between New Zealand and the rest of the world from a physical trade and visitation process. So for us to be able to open up those international relationships virtually, I think will be a huge bonus for the New Zealand primary sector, and from a trusted platform, I think it would go really well.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I totally agree with you. Thank you so much. And if you can get on between in July, I've got the dates again. I'll just clarify that. 13th of July through to the 26th of the July, the virtual field days will be online, and I'm sure there'll be some substantial marketing around how that will be displayed and how you can participate. That's Peter Nation, the CEO of Fieldays. Joel, I just wanted to just point something out. There's some captions being generated across the stream at the moment on Facebook that are coming out in a bit of a jumble, just letting you know that's coming through. So, look, if you've if you've just joined us, Sarah's Country, of course, is live Monday through Thursday, 7 o'clock. And, of course, you can catch us on demand first thing in the morning on podcasts, as well as all of the videos that will be up on the Farmers Weekly YouTube channel. Now, next on Sarah's Country, we will take your questions on where things are at with the M.Bovis eradication. Those questions that came in, of course, last week, I have held them over, and yours tonight, if you leave in the comments below, to the Chief Science Advisor for the Ministry for Primary Industries. That is with John Roche up next. This is Sarah's Country.
To New Zealand.
We know things are really tough out there right now.
People are concerned about their health and the health of their loved ones.
People are worried about the economy and when will things get back to normal.
Believe me when I say, us farmers are feeling it too. But now's no time to panic.
Our country can get through this together.
We just need to follow instructions and stay home.
Inside our bubble.
Let's flatten this curve and stop this disease spreading.
Together!
You don't need to worry about supermarkets getting low on food. There's plenty to go around for
everyone!
All the countries that could run out of food, New Zealand is not one of them.
Our farmers are world leading.
And we're damn good at what we do, producing high quality food.
We have strong supply lines.
And we're all working hard to keep food on the table. For your family and for ours. New Zealand dairy farmers produce enough for 100 million people.
You're in good hands, New Zealand.
You can count on us to keep calm and carry on farming.
We're trusting you to stay at home to keep our country safe.
We are following the rules too.
We can do this!
We're all in this together.
Cheers, New Zealand.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
Like electric fencing.
Or horse feed.
Or bee suits.
Children's.
Chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm...
Grow.
Milk. Drench.
Rear! Come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Okay, so I have to apologise. Joel has just shown me how my hair colour may have contributed to the fact that I was the only one seeing captions coming across the Facebook stream. It's under the settings, so ignore that. Sorry about that. Now, I'm loving your feedback coming in and the questions tonight. I'm learning about the board games that you enjoyed as a child or also you're enjoying over lockdown with your family. So please, in the comments below, send me some of those favourites that you're enjoying at the moment. There's certainly a lot of great ones as a kid, like Snakes and Ladders, but through to some more adult-friendly ones, like Cards Against Humanity. I want to know what you're enjoying. Before we go into our next guest, talking about young Joel, our show producer, I've named him the Minister of COVID just specifically here at Blink because, of course, there's only two of us allowed in the building. He's always coming to me with his worldly facts, daily facts about what's happening around the world. And I think it's because Joel wants to constantly remind me how lucky we are here in New Zealand, him being Irish, just like our next guest, because it's obviously madness around the world. And today he was in quite a state of anger about what was happening in the US, Joel.
Very dramatic, quite a state. I mean, I'm a wee bit annoyed by it. It's not quite a state.
No, but Joel, I mean, seriously, the US is mad.
It is. Yeah, I realised today that they've had more deaths from COVID-19 than they had in the entire Vietnam War, which is just insane. And they're out protesting in the streets because they all want to go back to work. But I don't get it.
But you're saying to me that they're all catching COVID, protesting together.
Yeah. They're all going out. They're all blocking the roads with their cars and catching it off each other. And it's going to prolong their lockdown. And they're going to get angrier. And then, I don't know, they're going to start shooting each other.
Imagine trying to herd those cats. I mean, this is insane. It's insane what we're dealing with around the world. And sometimes I have disagreed with a lot of things that are happening here in New Zealand. But count ourselves so lucky. Now, of course... we are going into our next guest, which I explained before is the Chief Science Advisor to the Ministry for Primary Industries and one of Joel's fellow Irishmen. John Roche joins us now. John, I have to say that because Joel got very excited when he was talking to you when he was checking the connection there. He hadn't heard an Irish accent for a while.
Well, that's fantastic. Kia ora, Sarah, and Agrihq, Joel.
Hiya. I haven't heard that in a while.
Oh dear, they're talking in another language. Wonderful. Now, John, we have a series of questions to get through, so we'll cut straight to the chase. A few came in last Thursday too. Of course, we had the head of the M.Bovis eradication, Stuart Anderson, on, and of course, he's only been in the seat a week or so unfair to throw some very technical scientific questions to him, of course, of what you can handle. Now, first question. This person would like you to explain to them why we're taking a whole herd eradication approach for a disease that doesn't pose a risk for human health or trade. This seems like a foot and mouth approach for something that is decidedly not foot and mouth. And they would like to know if there's a plan B and how long are we going to stick to plan A to see if it's not working before we move to plan B, especially when we've now exceeded cull estimates from the start of 150,000.
Wow, that's a long question. Well, let me see if I can get through that, Sarah. So, why are we taking a whole herd eradication approach? Well, there's two parts to that. Firstly, why are we taking an eradication approach? And that's because the dairy industry and the beef industry decided 2 years ago that they would like to not have Mycoplasma bovis in the country, and the government partnered with them to eradicate it. There's a number of reasons why they would want that. Firstly, outbreaks of the disease are particularly difficult for farmers and for animals. So there's a strong animal welfare issue here. And having been involved in dairy farming in the United States, I've dealt with mycoplasmas firsthand and Mycoplasma bovis firsthand. And it is really difficult. An outbreak is very difficult with incurable mastitis, seemingly healthy calves dying overnight, etc. So it's nothing I would wish on anyone. Because of our system of farming, with concentrated calving patterns, increasing stress points in the farming system, outbreaks are likely to be worse in a pasture-based system than they are in other systems overseas. And I suppose, importantly, the disease was not widespread in New Zealand, or our best estimates at the time that the disease was not widespread in New Zealand, and therefore eradication was still feasible. And that was the advice that they got from the technical advisory group. So that's the reason for eradication. The reason for whole herd eradication is, again, twofold. A, we don't have a reliable individual animal test. So we can't go into a herd, test the entire herd, identify the animals that have Mycoplasma bovis, pull them out and cull them, and leave the rest of the herd alone. That's one. And two, the research we have done in New Zealand, and we've probably done more research on Mycoplasma bovis in New Zealand now than anywhere else in the world, but also the research that's been done all over the world shows that if you have Mycoplasma bovis positive animals in the herd, then the vast majority of the herd will be infected. So that's the reason for the whole herd eradication approach. Now, the comment that it's like a foot and mouth approach, anyone, and Joel might be able to comment as well as I on this one, but anyone who spent time in a country trying to eradicate foot and mouth will know that this is nothing like a foot and mouth approach. In a foot and mouth approach, it'd be very similar, actually. You were mentioning COVID, very, very similar to COVID. You lock down the country. So you get out the police, you get out the army, and you stop everybody moving. And then you start testing every herd in the country and narrow in on the herds that actually have foot and mouth, and cull those herds and destroy those animals. So it's very, very different. What we're going through is what we call a phased eradication approach, which means we are literally only putting restrictions on herds that have received animals from herds that have been confirmed to be infected. So that's very, very different to foot and mouth. However, I suppose regarding your point of similarities to foot and mouth, one of the things we've learned from Mycoplasma bovis is, there is a significant lack of compliance with our National Animal Identification and Tracing System, our NAIT system in New Zealand, and that very large numbers of animals move around New Zealand every week. So we have a lot of work to do as animal industries to ensure we could manage a faster moving disease like foot and mouth. And then the other part of the question was if we have a plan B. So let's talk about plan A for a second, because you mentioned we've culled 150,000 animals, which is just past what the original estimate was. The TAG report in February of last year, so February 2019, basically said to forget about those original estimates, that we had far more information at that stage that we could use to predict going forward. No other country had tried to eradicate Mycoplasma bovis, so we were really we were the first, and it's never easy to be first, but we were making those predictions in a void of knowledge. So the fact that we've just over 150,000 animals now, and the number of herds that we're finding is declining all the time, is actually a positive. The predictions were really, really close, despite a real lack of knowledge. The other thing to say about that is 150,000 animals over 3 years is approximately 1% of the animals that we would cull from the dairy and beef sector over that time anyway. So not wanting to belittle, obviously, the trauma that individual farmers have gone through the process of the response, because, I feel for them. 150,000 animals sounds like a huge amount of animals, but that's because our industries are actually so large. It is only approximately 1% of the animals that we would have culled over that period of time anyway. But plan A versus plan B. So firstly, plan A. Plan A looks to be going really well. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, because we don't get an opportunity to talk about it often enough. So where we do, we try and tell as many people as we can. So we've got a number of measurements that allow us to tell if plan A is going well or not, plan A being eradication. So firstly, the phylogenetic analysis, the analysis of the bacteria, still indicates that we had a single incursion. We've only had one incursion. And we are continuing to assess the genetics of the bacteria with every cull. The estimated dissemination rate is below 1. Now, you'll have heard in the COVID updates, Ashley Bloomfield talk about a reproduction rate of the virus. And yesterday or the day before, they announced that the reproduction rate of the virus was below 0.5. What that means is that in the COVID world, every infected person is infecting less than 0.5 of one person, which means the curve is on the down. We're actually winning the war against the virus on the basis of those measurements. If we take that back to Mycoplasma bovis, we use a slightly different measurement. We also look at reproduction rate, but we look at a slightly different measurement, which is the estimated dissemination rate, which is the number of herds that become infected from infected herds. And as long as that's below 1, then we are actually winning the war on Mycoplasma bovis. That has been declining since the eradication began, and it has been below 1 for quite some time now, and is continuing to decline. So that again gives us confidence that we're winning the war. We're doing more tests continually, and we're finding less positive farms. So again, just like we're seeing with COVID, that indicates that we're winning the war on Mycoplasma bovis. And our operational timeframes have improved. I mean, we've been criticized, and we've deserved some of the criticisms that we've got over the last several years. as I've said in the past, we're the first people to try this, so we're not going off a blueprint. We had to build the plane while we were flying it, and so it's been a difficult time for all involved, and we've certainly got better at doing those. So they're all probably important items to highlight to your listeners.
Thank you so much, John. That was a very thorough explanation and a great long answer. I've just got a couple more, if you wouldn't mind. I know it's a very hard thing to do, but we've got a couple more interviews to fit in as well. In particular, what about the point of that Plan B when we move to accepting that there's always going to be traces of this within, even though they are low transmission rates, that we will have to just get on and manage this disease within, similar to our efforts to eradicate TB?
So our hope is that we won't have to do that, and exactly our hope obviously is that we won't have to do it with TB either with an eradication program. The problem, as I've mentioned earlier, with Mycoplasma bovis is not having a really, really sensitive test, and so as it gets lower and lower prevalence in the country, we will need a more sensitive test. And so we have a number of research projects on the go to try and both improve the tests that we're currently using, and they are good tests. I don't want anyone to think that they're not. They are very good tests in the way that we're using them. But as we get to a lower level of prevalence, we will need a more sensitive test, and we've got a lot of research being undertaken currently to develop those tests.
Okay, and just to end on that, one of the very first things that came out, I remember in the very initial, was the speculation that the disease was brought in via imported semen through a unique process that was used on the very first farm it was discovered through a vet. And MPI have continuously denied and refused acknowledgement that the disease has come from semen. I would like your thoughts on that and why semen is still, of course, allowed to be legally imported into New Zealand.
Sure. Look, it's a great question. I wasn't aware that we had denied that it had come in through semen. Semen is certainly one of the risk pathways that we believe it could have come through, but it is an extremely low risk. There were far greater risks. Obviously, the greatest risk with transmitting Mycoplasma bovis would have been in live animals, but since we had stopped that before this, that was not likely to be the case. But there was, farm machinery, veterinary medicines, germplasm, they were all evaluated as potential risks. And so, germplasm, either semen or embryos, are a risk, but they're an extremely low risk. And to put that in perspective, we've been importing semen for decades now, and this is the first incursion of Mycoplasma bovis that we've ever detected. Now, that's not to say it didn't come in earlier and it was just wiped out naturally. Highly unlikely that would have happened because of the way we farm. But certainly we've imported an awful lot of semen, and we haven't brought it in the past in that way. Why is it still allowed to be imported? Well, look, we run a risk-based importation system. We are part of the World Trade Organization, and as a trading nation, as a nation probably more dependent on trade than any other nation in the world, we need to stick to the rules of the World Trade Organization, particularly in the turbulent times that we're dealing with right now. We have very strict sanitary and phytosanitary regulations on what we can and cannot deny entry into the country. That is based on a risk approach, and so we undertake a risk evaluation and a risk analysis, and we develop import health standards on the basis of those. We are currently reviewing the import health standards for semen, so we are evaluating that at the moment. But that's the reason why we can't just do a blanket ban and say there will be no semen imported into the country, because we will see an action by other countries that would stop us exporting our goods to them in retaliation.
I said that I don't like throwing guests under the bus, John, but your last parting question is, what was your favourite board game?
My favourite board game? Well, my wife would tell you that I hate board games, partly because I hate to lose. But my favorite board game is probably chess. I'm one of those boring strategy tacticianers.
Of course you are, especially in the role that you're doing as the Chief Science Advisor for MPI. That is Dr. John Roche. And thank you very much for a very thorough explanation of where things are at with the M.Bovis eradication. I'm sure, well, you could talk about where things are at for hours, and I really appreciate you taking the time to give us a snapshot. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to hear from Agrihq Senior Sheep and Beef Analyst Mel Croad with an update on processing capacities into next week and where our international markets are at to take our backlog of product as we go into the winter. This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Well, obviously, over the last couple of weeks, things change so rapidly. And of course, heading into next week, we're looking at what Alert Level 4 means for our processing capacity, as well as what that flow-on effect will mean to store prices. But the big question is our international markets ready for this backlog of product? We're joined tonight on Sarah's Country by Agrihq's Senior Sheep and Beef Analyst Mel Croad. Mel, welcome to the program. Now, I suppose, can we just start to set the scene around where capacity has been over the last week and what it generally looks like going into next?
Yeah, hi Sarah, thanks for that. I think we've all been quite well versed over the last 4 weeks whilst we've been in lockdown that capacity has been reduced. We've heard anywhere from 50 to 70% depending on whether it being sheep or cattle. We are also hearing through this time that a lot of the companies have actually worked really hard to get those efficiencies in place and have actually probably lifted from those first initial capacity percentages. So I guess it's very early days. We saw earlier in the week that under level 3 from next week, spacing at the processors could drop from 2 metres to 1 metre. Our Agrihq analysts we've been on the phone talking to contacts just to get a view of what next week's going to look like. I think some are still, getting a little bit of guidance on policies, practices, but there does appear to be mixed positions on expanding capacity. We're only just getting used to the level 4 lockdown and those restrictions, and it just feels like here's some new changes. I guess it's just a testament to how fast things are moving. I'm sure sheep and beef farmers aren't getting used to the fact that they can't get stock away, and they'd really like to see that play out. I mean, of course, David Savard from Alliance was speaking to Jamie Mackay earlier this week, and there seems to be such differing rules or messages coming out of our processors on how much they can speed up and by what stage. So farmers are getting very confused and sadly going back to playing the field. Yes, there have been differing signals. We did have, one of the larger processors saying earlier in the week that they could move to 90 to 100% capacity from as early as next week. I guess others have been a little bit less bullish. And some of the early indications we're seeing is that some may not necessarily take advantage of the drop in spacing requirements. We're hearing some are saying, the efficiency gains that they've been making would actually match what level 3 would look like. I think some of the guidance that they're looking to gather is coming down to keeping staff safe. And, we really can't overlook that. The key here is that we need to increase throughput, but we also need to maintain the safety of the staff at the processing plants. And look, a lift in capacity also means a lift in staffing numbers, and that's not going to happen overnight. But I do know what you mean. I think if meat companies are going to take different stances on throughput, then they've got to have a really clear message to their suppliers. There is nothing worse than a farmer struggling to get stock away because they don't understand the stance their company has chosen to take when they look across the fence and their neighbours getting away all their stock because their plant chose a differing view. There's a lot of stress and anxiety out there at the moment, so we've really got to make sure those messages are clear.
So what sort of impact is the drought playing in all of this?
Oh, look, I really do feel that if large parts of the country weren't still, suffering from drought conditions, particularly this close to winter, that the spotlight probably wouldn't be shining so brightly on the processors. We might be actually more interested about how our meat is selling into overseas markets, but all of a sudden there's just been this massive emphasis placed on throughput, on reduced capacity, on pricing downside at the farm gate, and there's been a lot of negativity from it all as well. It's certainly brought out a lot of experts, and I think unfortunately the drought's completely magnified the slowdown that COVID has placed on the industry. It's brought in a lot of emotion too, and I guess bottom line, if the drought wasn't having such a presence, then we probably wouldn't be so concerned by what level 3 might look like. We might be able to be processing that stock a little more fluidly than what we are, but it is just really adding to the pressure both on farm and for processors.
Mel, there's a lot of online transactions that we can visually see how it's affecting farm gate prices, both prime and store. It's plummeted horrendously in the beef market. So, is it just this complete shortage of winter feed that we're looking down the barrel of and no one wanting to take any risks?
Absolutely. That, there's just been so much uncertainty in the last, not even in the last month, but right through 2020. Farm gate prices have fallen since the lockdown, but look, the fall has been a lot less than what we actually saw through January and February. So in the last 4 weeks, we've seen at a slaughter level sort of anywhere on average from 10 to 30 cents a kilo for cattle, and as much as 30 to 35 cents a kilo for lamb. Now, that is a lot, and for lamb, it is a very clear break in tradition. But in those first 2 months of the year, we actually saw anywhere from 90 cents to $1.30 a kilo coming out of beef and lamb prices for slaughter. So, I think exporters and processors have been doing their very best in these current, trying conditions. And it has absolutely impacted on the store market. The lack of feed is a big impact. But also, we saw a very strong market last November, December, both at store and slaughter. So a lot of store stock was bought back on a very high market. And unfortunately, those animals have since devalued by quite a substantial amount right through into April. So there is that general feeling of not really wanting to have to offload those store stock and take a massive hit. But then there's also the trouble of actually getting stock into processing plants and just easing all those pressures. So, yeah, there has been some big negative impacts on farm gate prices, and I would like to think we're hopefully through the worst of it, but we've just got to play this week by week at the moment.
Let's talk about our international markets and the effect of COVID-19, in particular, in the US and ground beef markets, seeing takeaways and drive-throughs reopening. that surely should be able to take a lot of this throughput that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, we have seen consumers in the US just start to relax a little bit, and yes, the drive-throughs are seeing a pickup in demand and sales, which is great. And that stems from, when we originally went into lockdown, that all the demand was on supermarkets and retail, and eating out or dining out or takeaways sort of fell by the wayside. Unfortunately now in the US market, they're also dealing with very high rates of infection in staff at their processing plants. And that's becoming a real struggle. Look, some of those beef processing plants in the US have daily throughputs of over 6,000 head. Their weekly cattle kill was sitting at over 600,000 head a week or two ago. That's plummeted by 25%, just with the closure of these processing plants. So yes, they are now looking at, some potential shortages of meat, be it beef, chicken or pork in the US. Cattle can handle a slowdown at processing, but unfortunately for pork and chicken, any slowdown there actually increases the likelihood of on-farm culling. So there's still some really big issues for some of our key markets to work through, and whether we can take any positives or off from that, we're definitely looking and working at whether we can see more beef heading into the US market to support the shortages there and that growing demand for the burgers again. It would be good if we could see a little bit of upside there.
Hey, with the lack of processing capacity in the States, what sort of impact is that having on our competition into, say, China?
The US aren't
big exporters.
Beef or lamb exporters into China.
Right.
But if we look at just China as a standalone, we have seen improvements in demand for New Zealand products back into China in the last month. It has been a welcoming bright light there. By no means are we seeing prices soar, but just the fact that we've got a market that is determined to get back on its feet and is looking to New Zealand for product is a really positive start. We've got to understand too that we are dealing with softer in-market prices across the vast majority of markets that we put New Zealand lamb and beef into. And that is reflected in our back at our farm gate prices as well. It's also reflected, I guess, in the fact that we've got to be careful about running at 100% capacity in the next few weeks. We've got to have that capacity balanced with market demand and pricing levels in those key markets. And if markets are open to more product out of New Zealand and being able to capitalise on that by increasing throughputs would be a really great start. And it would be, also the first step to preventing any further downside at the farm gate. But we've just got to be really careful that the market's in that position now for us to up our throughputs and up our offerings on those overseas markets.
Thank you so much. As always, balanced and sensible advice from Mel Croad, Senior Sheep and Beef Analyst for Agrihq. Now, of course, to carry on this theme, after the break, we will be joined by Sirma Karapeeva, who is the new head of the Meat Industry Association. And I know that she has hit the ground running in her new role, which, of course, will be some high-level discussions with, of course, Beef and Lamb New Zealand and the processes on what does Level 3 look like and how are we going to clear this backlog that we have, or bottleneck in particular. That is more coming up after the break, so please put your comments below and questions that you may have for Sirma. That's all good. We just coming straight back in after that, of course, Mel was recorded a bit earlier this afternoon, and there has been some questions come in for her, which I'll hold over for our next guest. It's great to see the UK always start to wake up around now and tune in. Bray is going nuts in the comments. Thank you very much, Bray. We are reading those, of course. And so the headline of Colin Williscroft from Farmers Weeklies in the Newsmaker section section this week. The headline reads, "New role, a baptism of fire." I think it's aptly framed for our next guest, who walked into the head position of the Meat Industry Association and joins us now on Sarah's Country. Welcome to Sarah's Country, Sirma. It's been a very, very crazy, busy time for you in this new role.
Oh, it most certainly has been, and thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to join you on your podcast. And very exciting. This is my first podcast ever, so yay. But yeah, no, certainly it's been a baptism by fire, and I don't see this letting up in the near future, but what doesn't break you makes you stronger is my motto.
Hey, so let's start off but we really want to get into the guts of what's happening in these Zoom rooms across the country with our processors, beef and lamb, Meat Industry Association, to give advice out to farmers. But let's get to know you first. A wonderfully diverse accent there. Whereabouts did you grow up and go through your career to get to a position like this?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of an international person. I was born in Bulgaria, but I spent my youth in Africa, predominantly in Tanzania and Zimbabwe. My parents, my mum in particular, was working there as an architect, building medical stores and low-cost clinics for an aid program. And then I spent a bit of time in Denmark, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I guess, as a young, fancy-free teenager, and then moved to New Zealand to do my university at Massey University in Palmerston North, of all places.
And then heading into the Ministry of Economic Development recently to then move into, so your background in trade, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so part of the reason for joining Massey was at the time they had a really strong international business program, and that's always been a strong interest of mine, international business law, management, and the likes. And they also had a very strong international students program, so a lot of support around international students. And of course, I was one of those international students coming into New Zealand. So the role at the Ministry for Economic Development, which subsequently became the mega Ministry of MBIE, really was a junior analyst or an entry-level analyst to get my feet under the table and understand the workings of government, the machinery of government, how it all operates, and the likes. And then very quickly after that, I moved into trade-facing roles, working on the Trans-Tasman desk, working on the Australia-New Zealand relationship, and a review of a very fundamental piece of trade architecture that exists there. And then from then moved on into trade negotiations, and I think I've had my finger in many trade negotiation pies, so to speak, from the China agreement through to Malaysia, Taiwan or Chinese Taipei, Hong Kong, and more recently RCEP, and certainly the TPP or the CPTPP as it became known. So yeah, long history in trade, and it's certainly an area that lights my fire. And moving into the meat industry, of course, we are the second largest export earner for New Zealand with a huge international focus. And really those international markets are fundamentally important to the success of the industry and the sector as a whole, and a huge contributor to New Zealand's economic well-being as well.
So you've obviously listened to Mel Croad's analysis and market commentary there earlier. What do you make of China reopening and that being the hope to this backlog of throughput that we need to process at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly the markets have been very unusual, and you cannot predict what's happening from one day to the other. You would know that early in February, at the end of January, early February, we saw a lot of disruption in the China market as it shut down due to COVID. And then in March, it started reopening. Now we're seeing a little bit more of that going back to business, going back to normal. And we are very hopeful that it will continue to do so, because we're now seeing on the other side of the world, the US markets starting to get a little bit unstuck, and there's disruption there with cold storage issues, with plants closing down because of COVID-19 outbreaks amongst the workforce and the like. So, it's really positive that China is starting to pick up again, and we're hoping that as people come out of lockdown, they will start to celebrate. Chinese tend to celebrate with food, and food is what we produce, and it is good quality food. So hopefully that's a real opportunity for us to get back into that market and to continue to service those needs and demands from the Chinese consumers.
So here at home, there has been some varying messaging coming out of the different processes, Sirma, and I know that you have in the last couple of days been at the table to ensure that some consistency in the processing protocols is worked on with MPI, and an email is going out to farmers, a joint press release tonight. Could you give us a bit of an understanding of how we can speed up that chain whilst keeping these workers safe?
Well, that's right. Sarah, of course, when we went into lockdown, the industry moved incredibly quickly to put in place a very robust and stringent protocol, the Alert Level 4 meat processing protocol, and that was really targeted at keeping workers safe first and foremost, making sure that workers have the confidence to come to work and to continue to do their jobs, while at the same time keeping the processing lines and the processing companies operating, and keeping the jobs going and the like. So, but in order to do that, in order to implement those protocols and that stringent level of hygiene and safety, companies had to look at the capacity issue, and it certainly meant that there was a reduction in capacity. I think ovine capacity went down to 50%, and we saw bovine or beef capacity fall back 30% to 70%. So there was a slowdown, of course, because people were spaced due to the social distancing rules. People were spaced more widely. There was less workforce on site and the likes. Now that we are listening to the government predictions or guidelines, I think, as to what Alert Level 3 might look like, we are in the process of discussing what that would look like in practice on the processing floor. And again, the driving consideration has to be the worker safety and preventing the spread of the COVID-19 disease. So, that cannot be underestimated, and companies all want to do the best that they can to help alleviate the anxiety of their workforce and coming into work. The question, though, is what do the government guidelines tell us in terms of how those processing lines can be configured? And we're looking very closely at the distancing requirements and what we're allowed to do with shorter distances between workers, and whether that might in fact provide a little bit more flexibility for companies to increase their throughput and their capacity.
Understand 100%.
But I'd like to say,
yeah. Sorry,
but I'd like to say that despite the constraints under Level 4. We have seen companies look to make marginal improvements wherever they can to alleviate some of that pressure on the capacity issue, because their stakeholders, the farmers that they work with, are in a real bind at the moment, and I think the companies are certainly very mindful of that and working very hard to try and manage it as best as they can.
Yeah, I understand completely around worker safety, 100%. But if we've got a extremely stressed, frustrated farmer watching right now who's getting through sort of 5% of his normal kill rate, going into extremely tight feed situations going into the winter, is there a way that the message is getting through to government that this part of the industry is extremely suffering and there's massive animal welfare issues going on out there? They're bailing out the airlines, they're bailing out media. Is that strong message getting through that that this is really starting to hurt, and there's a heap of things going on right now for farmers to be able to navigate decision making when no one's buying store stock, and it's getting really hard. We're going over to moving day coming up soon. We've got M.Bovis, of course, sitting there driving this as well. I think the main question there, Sirma, is are you having those frank conversations to government level?
Well, I'd like to assure you and your listeners that we certainly are having those conversations, both from the MIA perspective as well as our colleagues in Beef and Lamb New Zealand and Dairy New Zealand. Our voice has not been silent in talking to government about the pressures that the sector as a whole, both sides of the farm gate, are experiencing, and where we want government to step up and help us to navigate the challenges that we're facing at the moment. So, if farmers are uncertain about wait times or processing times, the only thing I can suggest at this point in time is to have those conversations with their processors to get the most up-to-date information, because it changes. It really does from day to day. Processors are constantly making tweaks to help manage that pressure point for their stakeholders, for farmers, and to keep operating as fast and as much capacity as they can. So I would certainly encourage farmers to talk to, pick up the phone and call your processing company and get the real and most up-to-date information.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sirma. Thank you so much for having the guts and the courage to walk into this role. I know you've got this. And we wish you all the best, because it's certainly not a role that a lot of people would have taken on. And of course, an amazing predecessor of Tim Ritchie that did a great job as well. And with your background that you've just explained, I know that you'll go very, very well. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity. And I look forward to being able to continue this conversation with you in the future.
Thank you. Absolutely. It's Sirma Karapeeva, the new CEO of Meat Industry Association. Now, I know we've run over time. That's the beauty of a live show like this. You can. So anyway, that is all we've got tonight. I've loved your engagement. Apologies there for those catching up over on Sarah Perriam's Facebook page. The live feed didn't go out straight away at 7. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Of course, as you know, if you have missed any of the interviews, you can catch them on demand on my podcast. If you don't know where to look for podcasts, ask somebody who may be able to help you, or also head to farmersweekly.co.nz, and of course you can find all of the on-demand videos as well as how to contact the show. Now, if you also want to send me your suggestions on guests that you want to hear from, or we can have you yourself on, send them to sarah@sarahperriam.com. So I want to say tonight, good night, go well, and we will see you back here on Tuesday night. Of course, Anzac Day observed on Monday. Have a great weekend staying friends with your household and smashing them at board games, for soon we will not have these precious moments as regular as we do, and we'll talk about the good old days. This is Sarah's Country.